What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into another edition of the In the Paint podcast here on the network. We break down everything college basketball has to offer. And with me, as always, is my friend and co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. We got one more extended day of
Yep.
February, and then guess what? We wake up on Friday and it's March, and that means only one thing. The madness is about to start, the music's going to start, and let the dancing begin.
Amen. It's a perfect prelude because I think what is it, March 1st or March 2nd, I should say. And we will get to these later in the show, but keep an eye. This Saturday could be the best Saturday all season of college basketball before we hit the big dance. And it's a perfect little, teaser, if you will. But we've made it essentially. The regular season is a lot of fun, but once March hits, I think everyone kind of immediately, even if it's subconsciously, just I'm going to start watching college basketball because it's March, and you want to be ready for your bracket and all that stuff. But hopefully you've been listening to us from the start of the year and you've essentially had a nice little head start to that. So we got plenty to get to on this episode, do our usual stuff, but we are going to start, really kind of where we have to. The big news coming out of this past weekend in college basketball. Not only, look, we talked about Wake Forest Duke, and we talked about how Wake is, that's a big game for them. If they win it, they might be in. And they went out and they got the job done over Duke. However, that was not the story. It was Kyle Filipowski being, having a little altercation, a collision on the court with some of the Wake Forest students, fans. I don't know the specifics, but the court storming, and that had to be helped off the floor when it was all said and done. He has returned. I think he's playing tonight, or he played last night.
He is playing,
He
yeah.
won't miss. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so he isn't going to miss time. That's right. It's Wednesday. I keep getting my days mixed up because of leap day. I'm going to keep blaming leap day for a few days. But yeah, so he is set to go. However, obviously, I think they put it down, or at least they talked about it as if it was a sprained ankle or a rolled ankle. I don't know the exact verbiage. I do think it was an ankle, but so now the question, essentially has to be asked. We did see, I want to say about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I'm a little hazy on the remembrance, but Caitlin Clark in the women's game, she had a collision. I believe that was at Ohio State. But Raider Jim, question for us, and I'll start with you. Is it time to ban court storming in college basketball?
I've always been on both sides of the fence on this one. On one hand, it's great. It's a fun thing at the football stadiums when you have, crowds of 100,000 and all of a sudden people start going on the field. Here's the difference. Those players are wearing pads, helmets, and probably outsize 90% of the people that are going to come onto the field. And but in basketball, it is different, because they are not padded. They are just wearing their shorts. They're still in their game uniforms. They don't even have sweats on, some of them. And here's my other concern as I watch the storming of the courts. Um, it's strength in numbers. Strength in numbers. Everybody, you
Mob
got those
mentality.
6 guys behind you. You got a big mouth and a lot of attitude, and you're gonna start yelling stuff across the street at that other guy till you realize the other guy has 12 guys. And so, but that's how trouble begins. And so you get and I'm just using Wake Forest as the example because that's the game that took place. So you get kids from Wake Forest who are all of a sudden all pumped up because they won the game, and they just have a disdain for Duke. So they decide they want to run up and start jawing at these guys too. These are kids. These are kids for all intents and purposes. I don't care if they're 21, 22 years old. They're kids. And you know what? They're also trained competitors. They should not have to be subjected to that. And I'm surprised that a fan hasn't been, totally clocked by, during one of these uh, gatherings in the court after the thing. Most of the time they're able to get out, but boy, it is a struggle if you watch. I do think they need to do something. I don't know what can you do. I can see
Yeah,
it
well,
coming
that's
in
the main thing.
as litigious as the nation has become. I can see it now where okay, so this team has to forfeit because we told you guys don't storm. We're going to forfeit if you storm the court. Oh, well, we're going to
Hmm.
file a lawsuit so that you can't do that to us because it's our God-given right. It's not your God-given right. It's your God-given right to sit in the seat you bought and shut the hell up. Cheer if your team wins, win with character and lose with dignity. I mean, let's just do it. But yeah, I think storming the court, it's going to be harder in the football games because it's such a vast environment, if you will. But but how do you do it? I don't know because you are going to get that section of kids who just don't care.
Yeah. Well, and it is, kind of going off of what you said with the, 6 verse 12 and all. It's the mob mentality. It's the, okay, they can't arrest us all, or they can't, get us all. And the difference, between football and basketball, besides kind of what you talked about, also with football, is you have a solid 20, 25 seconds to get away from the fray, if you will, because in college basketball and basketball in general, you're right on top of these people.
True.
And in college football, at the very least, you're gonna have to. If you got to go downstairs, if you jump down, it's not like you're on field level. You're elevated. It's not the easiest thing to do. Myself personally, I'm going to take the other side on this, and a big reason why is sometimes I do think we live in a bit of an overreactionary society. And now, first and foremost, thank goodness, both Caitlin Clark and Kyle Filipowski. I don't believe Caitlin Clark missed any time, and doesn't look like Filipowski will either. So, I want to say all's well that ends well, but at least in that situation, good. I'm glad that happened. But this happens multiple times a day, on Saturdays, whether it's storming the field, and you do see certain incidences, but even in college basketball, I think 99% of the time it's not a story on that side of it. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is, and I watched the video of the Caitlin Clark, I'm a big believer in intent. I could never ever know what's going through these people's minds. I really don't. But watching it, I don't see intent there. Now, after the initial collision, there was, I believe, a Wake Forest fan or somebody who pushed Filipowski in the back. That's not great, but I think that was a reaction. Maybe he saw an arm being extended by Filipowski. That's his. But once again, I'm not taking a stand for anybody, but I can at least understand in the heat of the moment where that came from. Could have been a lot worse. I think when it comes to the safety, I think if you're going to worry about the safety, I think the fans. I think we see a lot more injuries, and we don't hear about it a lot of the time because, frankly, it's not news to us sports fans. But I think the safety of the fans getting onto the court is a big one. I mean, stampeding is people. Unfortunately, we do see people die in stampeding, and I'm knocking on wood. I'm not putting that into the universe, but it is a dangerous environment for everyone involved. But I do think at some point there will be a full-scale ban. And what you just brought up is very interesting. Now, I think it was Jay Billis who essentially said everyone needs to be arrested. Look, I think that's a bit much. Okay. Now, obviously, if assaults happen or other things, then we could take it to that level. If you want to cite them for trespassing, they got to do 4 hours. Oh, okay. If there are cops out there that would like to do the paperwork for that, fine. But what you brought up with the forfeiting, because we did see it last night, or I don't know if you saw it, but Texas Tech, Texas, unfortunately for the Red Raiders, the fans, did what sometimes disgruntled fans do. They threw some things on the court. And in that situation, you get a administrative technical. And that, I think, slows the fans down. Now, unfortunately, they were down 27, so technicals didn't really matter. But I'm just saying, and you brought up
Right.
the forfeiting. That is interesting. Now, the backside of it is what you brought up. If it's a tournament game or a bubble being bursted, then maybe the law gets involved. But maybe that is the kind of shot across the bow to these kids. Hey, this is what needs to happen. I was also thinking too, now, I don't think you could actually do this, but somehow, some way, there's a little bit of a delay. Once again, it's not going to happen, but 10, 15 seconds, the buzzer sounds. I'm not even saying get through the handshake line, just opposing team off the floor, go crazy, everybody. But it is a situation. But even then, like, I don't know how you, I don't want to say keep them on a leash, but I don't know how you keep them back, especially in buzzer beater situations. But what was interesting is I did see a highlight, and of course I'm always going to bring up Philadelphia, but in the Philadelphia Catholic League, there was a buzzer beater in boys basketball, and it was fantastic. And they tried to storm the court, and security was like throwing people back. Now, once again, I don't know the financials of it. I don't think you could employ 45 security guards every single night, and 80% of the time you don't need them. So once again, there are a lot of things up in the air, but I do think you're right. I think steps need to be taken, but at the same time, I think it's what make college sports so great. And why I watch them, not necessarily for the court storming, but that passion. I don't know. I wish there was a middle ground. I see it both ways. I don't want to see it go away, but I do worry that something worse than this. I'm not downplaying what's happened over the past, 2 months, but at the end of the day, it's more of I think in 3 or 4 years, if we don't see something like this again, we probably won't remember these situations. And I'm hoping that's the case. But at the end of the day, in my mind, I think these altercations could be a lot worse. And once again, I really do believe that it was just unsafe situation, close quarters, ran into each other. I don't think there was intent. And especially on the Caitlin Clark one, I've watched the Caitlin. I'm not a big fan of people looking at their phones and say she's just, once again, not to be, to stand up for someone who's in their own world, but that's what it was. And once again, I'm a big fan of intent. I get cut off on the freeway, and yeah, I'm a little frustrated, but at the same time, that person didn't wake up brushing their teeth, be like, oh, at 3:45, I'm going to cut off a Nissan Sentra on the 5. Like that wasn't their intent. They just had a brain fart. It is what it is. So we'll see what happens. I don't think it's going to go quietly, but we'll see. It's going to be something to keep an eye on. I want a happy medium. I don't know where that is, but that's what I want to find.
Real shame of it is too, it really put the wrong focus on a fantastic victory for Wake.
100. It got him in the tournament. I think, outside of a first round loss in the ACC, I don't know how the bracket falls, but that's their tournament win, or their tournament, resume making win.
Yep.
So and what's crazy is too,
and then all of a sudden, it's like he doesn't get to enjoy it as much.
Exactly.
Trust me, they're still enjoying the victory, but it's like, okay, now instead of talking all about how we beat Duke, we got it. What's up front? Okay, well, let's talk about the fans. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about how you guys hurt one of the players. That because it automatically becomes guilty by association. Yeah. So you guys hurt the Filipowski. How do you feel about that? Can we talk about how we won the game?
Exactly. And I mean, they were even favored in that game, which was interesting. Thank goodness I didn't see that line, or I might have put some. Once again, I have a moratorium until the college basket, or till March Madness begins. I have to just watch from the sidelines. Haven't been prognosticating as well. But that is the hard part for Wake Forest, is it's like, hey, we won that game. And hopefully, I mean, I don't think it will, but I hope the selection committee doesn't, bury them or knock them for that. I don't think they will. I think, there are enough cooler heads prevailing there, but.
And you know what? There's so much video out there. Zoom in on the kid or kids who caused the injury, suspend them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to take it that far, I mean, like you said, we have video of everything.
Yep.
And obviously, yeah, more than likely that kid's picture is in the database, more than likely a student. And, it's going to be interesting to see how college basketball handles this going forward. But for uh, for 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 these situations, I just hope that this is the last time we talk about it. And hopefully we don't fall into a situation. We do our horse racing podcast where it seemed like every other podcast last year we were talking
Yeah.
about unsavory situations. So I hope that that's not the case for college basketball going forward. And one final thought too, and I hate to make excuses for the kids and all that stuff, but I do just wonder, when you're at Duke, when you're at Kansas, when you're at Purdue, some of these bigger schools, I maybe more preparation for these incidents. Look, everybody wants to pretend they're going to go undefeated. We're going to win every game, but at the end of the day, more than likely, if you're losing on the road, they're going to storm the court. So once again, I'm not making excuses for anyone, but maybe a little bit more. Hey, when the game ends, nobody cares about handshakes. Find the tunnel, get there as soon as possible. Keep your blinders on, find a buddy, and let's get to the locker room and get that bleep out of here, if you will. But once again, hopefully last time we talk about this, but I don't know, rules may be coming. But switching things up to another somewhat unsavory situation, and it's becoming a bit of a, I don't want to say common theme, but not the first time. We've talked about Jawan Howard and his I'll say antics on the court, and not for good. Obviously, 3 or 4 years ago, Jawan Howard was kind of that hot coaching prospect. He went to his alma mater at Michigan, took them to, I believe, maybe the national championship game. I think they lost, but they had a heck of a
Elite
run.
Eight.
Thank you, Elite Eight. So I gave way too much credit, but yeah, and then it started to kind of go downhill. Even when they had Hunter Dickinson, they weren't meeting expectations. We saw last year or 2 years ago, I believe it was him and Greg Gard, punches being thrown from Jawan Howard, things that we don't normally see when we talk about college coaches. And again, this weekend, we see Jawan Howard in the midst of, Michigan getting beat by, I believe it was Purdue, him essentially coming all the way to the key. I mean, he was in the paint on the court. These situations have kind of been mounting, and obviously Jawan Howard, I can't imagine his job. I don't think he's gonna be the coach next year. I believe Michigan's 8-20, or somewhere. They're really
Correct.
not. Okay, thank you. And even losing Hunter Dickinson, this has been a trend. So I think his job was probably already lost before all this. But Raider Jim, any thoughts on kind of what we're seeing out of Jawan Howard, over the past 3 years?
Well, I tell you, it's run differently than it does in the corporate world. I understand that. So we have a high-profile coach at a high-profile school, but if you look at these things like, throwing fists at the end of a game, not that many months ago, what happened this week, and when you have to have one of your players walking you back off the court, it's like that's like the kid that has to tell his dad, "Don't get in a fight, Dad."
Yeah.
And I mean, that's exactly what it is. And then there was also a situation, I believe it was in December, and nothing was ever confirmed, but it was kind of like witnesses said, "Nah, there was an altercation between him and the strength, I think conditioning coach, I believe it was."
Yep.
And so in the corporate world, what they would do is bring you in, sit you down, and say, "Okay, this is the third time something like this has happened in X amount of months. We are going to recommend that you go to this person and let's talk about anger management. So
Mm.
you need to go do that. If you don't do that, then there will be ramifications." Now, like I say, this is a whole different situation. Former professional basketball player, the guy wears the Letterman's jacket from the school, and he's high money. So their best case, and here's what's happened with him since he took over. First year he was there, yeah, they were first in the Big Ten. Uh, they were ranked fourth nationally at the end
Mm.
of the season, and they ended up losing in the Elite Eight round. What happened the next year? The next year they were 19-15, not quite as good. And I think they started out AP preseason as a 6.
Mm-hmm.
And by December, they were out. They weren't even in the top 25. They got an at-large. They got into March Madness, made it to the Sweet 16 round. They lost to Villanova. Then what happens? Now it starts going worse and worse. 2022-23 season, 18-16, 11-9 in the Big Ten, nowhere to be seen in the tournament. And this year, as you already said, they're 8-20, 3-14 in Big Ten competition, and they have lost 5 straight. So here's what you do. Take a look at this guy and what has happened. Take a look at, he might be, his fuse might be getting less and less and less. Could be the frustration of not being able to compete at the same level as he did in his first year. But when they get bounced from the Big Ten tournament, write him a check for $3 million and he's gone. Or you can wait until July, because if you wait until July, you only got to pay him $2 million. So if I'm the guys with the checkbook at Michigan, let him finish out the season. Let him know he's not going to be there, but maybe you don't let him know until June, because apparently that's the condition. He hasn't collected his incentives for the last 2 years, and they were very, very modest incentives, but he hasn't collected any just by virtue of performance. So I think it's just, I think the Jawan Howard story at Michigan started out great, but it's kind of like a movie where it starts out with a great action, car chase or something like that, and then you end up everybody singing Kumbaya for the rest of the movie. It's like, oh, that's kind of boring, isn't it? Yeah. So disappointing for the fans, disappointing for the program, but to take that big of a drop, drastic of a drop in 4 years, not good, not a good look.
Yeah. And I personally, and I think this is, you hear people say Michigan man. He's a Michigan man. He's a Michigan man. And a lot of schools, they have that mentality. And I think Michigan, it's to a fault. Now, very different scenario, but Jim Harbaugh, obviously we saw the cheating scandal. Michigan stood behind him. There was a lot of questions about, look, if Jim Harbaugh wasn't a Michigan man, if he was, Brady Hoke, just popped into my head. Obviously, a much worse tenure there, but would he have survived all that? Or would have they just kind of kicked him off to the side? And now that I think about it, Brady Hoke might be a Michigan man as well. But my point being, it is such that tribal loyalty to Michigan. I still am wondering how Jawan Howard survived the Greg Gard incident, because you brought up the corporate world. If you punch someone, you're not going to anger man. You're going home, and then we will send you your check, no questions asked. And personally, if you work in a company that they do send someone for anger management, I would suggest you find somewhere else, because that's not a great culture if they're letting people punch people in the face.
And the other thing is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, after his altercation in the end of the game situation, I think they actually added that he was on a 0 tolerance.
Yeah.
No more throwing at the end of games. No, so for him to walk out on the court, and I think that's why they have. I don't want to say downplay, but that's why, even though it made the news about the altercation with the conditioning coach in December, I don't know if that's why it's like, well, we still haven't had anything confirmed. I don't know. You had people say they saw it. You had people say they heard it. So did they or didn't they? And to your point about Harbaugh, here's the difference. They stood behind him because he's winning.
Yes, 100%. And yes,
100%. Big difference.
You are correct. Winning cures all. And you're very, very correct there. And the other part of the Jawan Howard thing is, we're not talking about a professional NBA coach. We're talking about, look, obviously college sports has changed the landscape. We're not talking about, student athletes anymore. We're not that naive. Look, these are, and basketball, we're not seeing, a large majority go play professional ball, but you are kind of setting the example for these kids, right? And you need to kind of set that example. I don't like having to see a 20-year-old having to calm a 50-year-old down. That's something that
right.
That's not, like you brought it up, the son at Little League trying to make sure his dad doesn't fight the other dad or the umpire, like that's not how it should go. And for Jawan Howard and Michigan, even with that, zero tolerance, and then we saw the allegations with the strength coach, that would have been an easy out for Michigan. They don't have to pay. Hey, you know what? He punched a guy. We gave him a second chance. Now we have reports, and if they want to come forward, I'm sure they did their own investigation. Maybe they found something. Who knows? Maybe they didn't. But if they did, that would have been an opportunity. And they would have, trust me, back in December, this team wasn't lighting the world on fire either. So that could have been a chance for them to kind of, like I said, for lack of a better word, cut them off. And
you
not have
wonder
to
if they'd
pay.
be 3-14. You wonder if they'd be 3-14 in conference play right now if he wasn't
Yeah,
the guy wearing this.
because there's the Big Ten has been perennially a very, very good conference top to bottom. This year, not so much. I don't even want to say it's top heavy. I mean, it's Purdue, and we've seen Michigan State pop their head up, Wisconsin's pop their head up, Ohio State will get a win. They've already fired their coach. Indiana's, I don't know. To only get 3 wins in this conference and being Michigan, I think it really speaks to recruiting. Because as you said, year one, they looked great. Those aren't Jawan Howard's kids. He didn't go and recruit those kids.
Right.
And you do wonder if his coaching style and his demeanor, whatever that is, I mean, we're seeing it, if that turns people off. And I'll tell you, if I'm a parent, I would probably have misgivings about sending my kid to be molded by Jawan Howard. I hope he gets the help he needs, whether it is anger management or some self-perspective, whatever it is. I hope he gets it. And I hope we talk about him 5 years from now at, Eastern Michigan, and look at what he's doing now. It's great. But the way it is right now, I don't know. I don't necessarily see a way back in for Jawan Howard. I certainly don't see him on the sidelines next year. The only problem I would have with firing him in whatever June or July is you're not kind of first one into that coach carousel. And I'll be honest,
Right.
the difference between 2 million and 3 million to Michigan is, a
One
quarter
football
of an
game.
offensive
One
line.
half of a football game.
Yeah, that's that they printed that in the time that this whole podcast has been mentioned. So that's the other part of it. But it's going to be something to keep an eye on. Jawan Howard, obviously, probably not going to go forward. But time to focus our attention as we get closer to the tournament. As I said last week, instead of focusing on the players, let's focus on some mid to low majors so that we can maybe find a 14 or a 15 that we talked about earlier, before they just kind of plop onto the screen on Selection Sunday, do a little diving there. Last week we talked about a mid-major, one of the better mid-majors in the Missouri Valley Conference. We're going to go to the low majors, and we're going to talk about the really, really smart kids, the future lawyers, doctors, accountants, astrophysicists, all of them, all the names I can't even pronounce. We're going to be talking about the Ivy Leaguers. Now, last week when we talked about the Missouri Valley, we made a case. Maybe they get 2, maybe possibly 3. No, probably only 2. Well, look, it's going to be only 1 out of the Ivy League. And as something we've seen change over the past few years is the Ivy League does run a conference tournament. It used to be there was no conference tournament. These kids very smart. They don't have time to spend any extra time playing basketball. They need to study, but the conference tournament is rolling, and I like that into it. And looking at the Ivy League, this is, as I said, a 1-bid conference. Whoever wins the conference tournament is going to get there. One team you have to keep an eye on, though, is Princeton. Obviously, at the moment, they are the number 1 team, at least tied for the top, but they're 21-3 overall. They have a net of 51, which is kind of like what we used to talk about with the RPI. But nobody else is anywhere close. So you could make a case that Princeton's a bubble team, but Princeton would have to win out. And at that point, if they win out, it doesn't matter if they're a bubble team. So keep an eye on Princeton, 21-3 right now. But right behind them, you have Cornell and Yale. I knew I was going to struggle going Cornell to Yale. I knew I was going to say Cornell. But anyways, Cornell and Yale, followed by Harvard, Brown, Columbia, Penn, and Dartmouth. With all due respect to Harvard, all the way down. This is a 3-team race for the tournament title. And even for the regular season title, as I said, those top 3 teams are all 9-2. One thing, I did a deep dive into Princeton. If this team makes the tournament, I don't think you're going to see them as a 15 seed. They might be a 13. Keep an eye on them. This is a team that grades out very well for March. They share the basketball, and they very rarely turn the ball over. Very good free throw shooting team as well. So Princeton, keep an eye on that. And look, whoever comes out of the Ivy League, 9 times out of 10, they're going to have the smartest kids on the floor regardless. So you always give a little nod to the basketball and just overall awareness. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the Ivy League?
Yeah, let me tell you, Princeton was picked as the #1 team in the Ivy League at the start of the season. They're holding their own right now. I'm going to say it's going to be Cornell in the upset. Right now, Princeton is 9-2, 21-3 overall. Cornell 9-2, 20-5 overall. Yale 9-2, 18-8 overall. Yale is kind of the weakest of the 3, if you want to put it that way. The reason I think we're going to see the upset is there's been a split, or there was not a split, but earlier in the season, a couple months ago, or a month ago, end of January, end of February, Princeton had back-to-back losses. They lost to Cornell and they lost to Yale. This coming Saturday, add this one to your Saturday watching, because Princeton plays Cornell. That could very much be a statement game for Cornell, and it'll determine whether or not they get the #1 seed in the Ivy League tournament. So I'm going to be watching that closely, because I do like when the Ivy League team makes it in. I like to see where did they get put. They're going to send those kids to Spokane, Washington or somewhere. They're not going to stay close to home by any stretch of the imagination. And as you alluded to, Ivy League, no way they're getting 2 teams in. They're getting 1 team. So it's winner take all for this tournament. And it's going to be good. It's going to be a well-contested game. But what a way for them to end the regular league play.
Yeah, that's a great way to kind of essentially throw the gauntlet down, almost like a de facto regular season championship game. And the one thing we kind of talked about this last week with the Missouri Valley, but whoever gets the 1 seed, I think is going to have a huge advantage, because the way the bracket shakes out is you got 1 versus 4. And right now, the difference between Yale and Harvard, just on the basketball, I don't want anyone to come at me in the comments, big rivalry there. But no, the difference between those 2 teams, massive difference. Whoever faces Harvard at the 4 seed, or if it's Brown or Columbia, just whoever is that 4 seed, is going to be you would assume, much easier game than whatever the 2-3 we would have to imagine would be 2 of those big 3 in the Ivy League. Really excited for this. Good call on the Cornell Princeton matchup this Saturday. I'm gonna have to sneak that on. I got to get a remote that has like the triple previous channel. During these games, you need 3 or 4 different previous channels. There's so many different channels too, so it's not like you get first world problems. But anyways, as we'll get to, Saturday is going to be a packed, fun day of college basketball. Do not sleep on the Ivy League. But Raider Jim, and now it's time to dive into our conference and team reports. As always, we're going to start with the West Coast Conference and your Gonzaga Bulldogs. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, West Coast Conference. Well, kids, here we go. Unless by some freak of nature thing, which we've seen in the NFL, we've seen it in NCAA men's basketball this year. So it could be that Pepperdine at home upsets St. Mary's, but I really don't think that's going to happen. I mean, St. Mary's has got to be a 20-plus favorite tomorrow when they hit the floor. And then tomorrow night, the Zags are playing USF, who still run fast, run hard. And I'll tell you what, it's on the road, so we'll see what happens. So the Zags can't look past USF, and I don't believe they will. If it plays out according to Hoyle, you're going to see the game of games on Saturday when when the Zags go into St. Mary's and play the last game of the season. But by that time, St. Mary's should have already wrapped up the West Coast Conference League Championship, I should say, League Play Championship. But Last time they got together, again, the Zags record, when you look at their West Coast Conference record, 12 wins, 2 losses by a combined total of 3 points. They lost by 3 points to Santa Clara and St. Mary's. Now, they played Santa Clara last week and decided they'd let Santa Clara know, it was a bit of a fluke and, shame on us. More so if we let you do it again. And they took care of business. I believe they beat Santa Clara by 13. When they go in on to play St. Mary's on Saturday, don't be surprised if it's a much different game than it was in Spokane. Partially because at that time, when they had that home game and the home loss, they were still adjusting. And Mark Few decided he had to do something a little bit different. Dusty Stromer, the freshman for Gonzaga, wasn't playing, making the impact they had hoped he might as a true freshman. However, he still plays a lot of minutes. He still has a role. But where they've turned it around is they have given more responsibility, if you will, to Ben Gregg. So now you've got a three-headed monster. You've got Ike, you've got Anton Watson, and you've got Ben Gregg. And Ben Gregg, the difference is between him and some other defenders, this kid can also shoot. Since they have made these adjustments to the lineup, they've gone 11-1. Granted, that loss was to St. Mary's by 2 points on a questionable call. Regardless, they lost the game. I will go on record today saying if the Zags don't win by 8 minimum on Saturday, I'll be surprised. They're going to make a statement. They know they can't win the conference, and that's fine, but they will let St. Mary's know. Don't get too excited about where you're ranked right now and the upcoming tournament. It's going to be a fantastic tournament, and there's no love lost. This isn't animosity between the coaches or the teams. They just know it's good competition, and it's going to be a fantastic tournament. West Coast Conference, when that comes underway in a week here. I think it's a week and a half away. Zags back into the top 25, which is good. And as I'm looking at the rankings right now, and after what happened earlier this week, I still have to shake my head and say, somebody explained to me how Kentucky manages to hold a 16 or 17 position, and the Zags with the same amount of wins and losses are somehow and beat Kentucky are fighting their way back into the top 25. I get it, they've lost some good games.
In Lexington too.
What's that?
Not a neutral court in November. That was a February win in Lexington. I think that was the most impressive win I think I've seen, in the conference play, if you will, even though it wasn't conference. But anyway, sorry.
And that is also that game also for Mark Few to schedule that game, go into their home court as bad as they were playing at the time, as badly as they were playing, went into their home court, took care of business. That was a statement game. That was a statement game, and they have been playing, firing on all cylinders since then. So we'll see how well they do tomorrow night against San Francisco. We'll see how well they do against St. Mary's on Saturday, and then everybody takes a week off, packs their bags, and gets into Vegas and let the tournament begin. Also, I couldn't get through this part of the segment without a big congratulations to the grown-ass man himself, Anton Watson. What a great senior night he had, and it's going to be not easy to see him walk off the court that last time, whenever that may be. But wow, big thanks to him for all the sweat he left on the court and all the impact he made to the program. Anton Watson, thank you very much.
Amen. Yeah, I think Gonzaga is a nightmare for a lot of teams when they get put in as a 6 or a 7. Maybe they get up to a 5. I haven't really seen the breakdown of all, but they are going to some 2 or 1, 2 or 3 is going to be looking at that second round and go, wait, what? And I agree with you. I think that Kentucky game was the let's say the tinder that started maybe this powder keg run that we could see out of Gonzaga. But that's going to be a heck of a scene. It would be really cool. I mean, I don't want to see St. Mary's lose or anything like that, but it would be really cool if that final game did turn into the de facto regular season championship game, but that would take a lot. I still think the crowd and the energy will be through the roof. It is still Gonzaga, and I
Absolutely.
believe St. Mary's will be going for a perfect conference record if that all shakes out
Correct.
correctly. So
Correct.
plenty
And
to
I'm a
play
big
for
fan of
both
Randy
teams.
Bennett, so
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I think now
congratulations to
obviously
him.
that's another guy that is in the mold of a Mark Few. He could have probably gone other places. I don't know where, but
Yeah.
I'm sure he could have taken a bigger job. And he said, no, you know what? I believe in the St. Mary's way. And they've done it his way. It's you can pretty much, take the names off of the kids year in and year out for St. Mary's, and you recognize you wouldn't know what year it was if you blurred their faces. They pretty much play the same type of ball. Really fantastic stuff from St. Mary's. A little early for lunch or for dinner, huh?
And,
Oh
and
well.
the other thing is, I also wanted to add too, I have been in the house when they had West Coast Conference, uh, end of league and the tournament. I've been there when Gonzaga does not win. And let me tell you, they still go to the tournament and they still make a good showing for the West Coast Conference. And I think to have them and St. Mary's representing is a very, very good thing for the conference. And I just wish BYU was still in West Coast Conference too, because boy, wouldn't that be a good trio to send into the March Madness.
Yeah, and don't sleep. Who knows? There is a chance that the WCC is a three-team conference. It would need someone to beat Gonzaga and St. Mary's, but I think Gonzaga and St. Mary's are both in the tournament. So if a kind of third team wants to come, whether it's a USF, who knows, USD and Steve Lavin have something up their sleeve, who knows? West Coast has a chance to be a three-bid conference, but I think a two-bid conference is probably the safest bet on that side of it. But switching gears onto my side of the aisle, if you will, it is San Diego State and the Mountain West. Look, the Mountain West continues to just be a bit of a gauntlet and continues to be a league that is very, very deep. And we have a new, invitee or a new entrance to the dance, and it's the UNLV Rebels. Now, the UNLV Rebels are not a bubble team. They did not have a good non-conference year. They have a net of 80. However, they're 10-5, only one game off the lead of Utah State, Boise, and a half game back of San Diego State. But keep an eye on UNLV. Obviously, the tournament is in Vegas. They're always the heavy, supported team when they go there. So keep an eye on UNLV. But Colorado State is essentially in seventh place. They're at 8-8. They have a net of 29. That's incredible for the Mountain West to have the seventh place team have a net under 30. And I'm sorry, I feel like I keep banging this drum, but I look at the Mountain West and I look at the numbers, it blows my mind. Now on San Diego State side of it, last time we talked, I told you, look, no numbers, no crazy thing. San Diego State, not good when they're ranked in their first game. And they went to Logan, and guess what? They could not get the job done against Utah State. Utah State took control of the Mountain West at that time. And the Aztecs have bounced back against two teams that they should bounce back against. I was very impressed with their win over, Fresno State. Because look, Fresno State isn't a team that worries me per se, but San Diego State is a much different team on the road. And they went to Fresno and they won by 32 points. That's their biggest win of the season, or at least one of their biggest conference win of the season. Definitely their biggest road win of the year. Once again, not anything you can hang your hat on. Hey, we went to Fresno and did this. Whatever. But I think internally for the team, I think that it goes, hey, you know what? We can go on the road. We can do these things. We don't have to be sleeping in our own bed every night to play well the next day. And then San Diego State followed it up earlier in the week with a 8-point win over San Jose State that was at Viejas Arena. Obviously, for San Diego State, the one thing that jumps out to me, at least, is the 14-0 record at home. Obviously, we all know what Viejas is. It's an incredible atmosphere, even especially this year after the heels of a national runner-up finish last year. I'll tell you what, I love the Padres. The hardest ticket to get in town is San Diego State basketball. And it's an absolute scene. And 14-0, they're carrying their business. However, flip side, 5-7 on the road. You got to be better on the road, period. Now, San Diego State, more than likely, you look at their tournament history and where they've been put, it's very rare they're put in the Pacific time zone. It's very rare they're put in the Mountain time zone when they play the first round. Last year, I think they got lucky because it was in maybe Arizona or Phoenix. So just by luck of the draw of getting into the Sweet 16, they got close. But the first round games, usually they put them in Central or Eastern time zone. So that's always a little tough, especially for a team that doesn't play terribly well on the road. But that's a problem down the line. For San Diego State, it's finish up strong. What they have to do, obviously, finish up against, they're going to have to go to Vegas. Think of it kind of as a pre-Mountain West tournament. Maybe if you want to run a scrimmage, you get there 2 days early because they are going to have time. They have an entire week off. We're recording on the 28th of February. They're not going to play till Tuesday, March 5th. So I don't know, maybe you get out there 2 days early and you play a full scrimmage and go into the thought process of, or even the day before, a thought process of, okay, we're in Vegas. This is what we're going to do for the Mountain West tournament. I don't know, just kind of thinking outside the box there, but they will be against UNLV and they'll finish up against Boise State, a very tough end to the season for San Diego State. But if they can win both those games, they will be a top 2 or 3 seed in the Mountain West tournament, which I think is very important. If they lose those, you might be looking at a 5 or a 6, and that just goes to show you how good the Mountain West is. So very important stuff for San Diego State. Do keep an eye. Once again, we're going to keep telling you about all these games on Saturday, but there is a good one in the Mountain West on Saturday to keep an eye on. New Mexico and Boise. That should be one that really has a big impact on how the standings end when it's all said and done. But with that being said, been harping on it, but these upcoming games, a lot to get to. And we already alluded to this first one. It'll be Thursday, Leap Day. The number 23 Gonzaga Bulldogs, they will be in San Francisco to face the Dons of USF. Then, of course, switching, everyone takes a deep breath on Friday, go out and enjoy yourself, get your family time in because you are going to want to be close to a TV on Saturday. A lot of great games. Apologies if I missed the ones you're thinking of, but once again, look at the lineup and we'd be here all day if we listed every single one. But first ones that jump out to me, you're going to look at number 24, Florida, at number 18, South Carolina. Keep an eye on South Carolina. They're a very interesting team. Number 7, Kansas, at number 15, Baylor. Seems every week we're talking about Kansas in a big game and Baylor. That Big 12 is crazy. Number 5, Marquette, at number 12, Creighton. Virginia, they're going to go to number 10, Duke. Number 1, Houston. They head to Norman. Look, selfishly, I put this one in. I'm still holding out hope that Oklahoma can somehow get back to what they were earlier this year. I don't know. I saw something in them earlier in the year, and I haven't seen it since, but it's my Midnight Bourbon team. I guess I always got to find one team that just let me down. But number 4. Oh, you're muted. What was that?
I say you read my mind. I was exactly thinking this is like Midnight Bourbon all over again.
What can I say? I'm a sucker for the lovable losers. Not to, and no disrespect to those athletes. I mean that very relatively. But number 4, Tennessee. They're going to head to Tuscaloosa to face number 14, Alabama. Take the over. Take the over. Alabama plays no defense. And number 23, Gonzaga, at number 17, St. Mary's, as we talked about. That'll be a great nightcap. I believe that's a nice little 8 o'clock matchup on the West Coast, 11 on the East Coast. So you'll be able to kind of watch that game without having to deal with previous channels or anything like that. Sunday, we do have a good one. Seton Hall, who's firmly on the bubble. They would love to get a huge tournament building win at number 3, UConn. Then Monday, Texas coming off of their win over Texas Tech. They will head to Waco to face number 15, Baylor. And yes, there are more. Tuesday, the 5th of March, number 2, Purdue, at number 13, Illinois. I'm really excited for that one. Number 14, Alabama, another big one against number 24, Florida. Kansas State at number 7 Kansas. Those rivalry games always tough. Kansas State has already beat Kansas once this year. And then Wednesday, a week from today, 3-6, March 6th, number 4 Tennessee at number 18 South Carolina, and number 3 UConn, number 6 Marquette. We're going to learn a lot about some of these top teams. I mean, South Carolina, Florida, I brought up multiple times. Alabama, I brought up multiple times. Kansas, I mean, I go on for days. Wow. Raider Jim, where do you start? What do you have your eye on this weekend?
I start with December 20th, 2023, when we look at this coming Sunday's game, when Seton Hall took care of business against UConn by 15 points, 75-60. Don't be surprised. It may not be a revenge game for UConn. It may be a Seton Hall, hey, wasn't a fluke. The other one I like, of course, is I always follow Marquette now. And so Creighton and Marquette, that's going to be a good one. Marquette's been kind of inconsistent at times. You know, there was a game against UConn we thought was going to be somewhat close, and then they just kind of didn't show up that day. Kansas and Baylor. Wow, if Baylor can put it together at home to start the month of March, and given Kansas just lost that game last night, I think it was.
Yeah.
Then don't be surprised if Baylor doesn't have an upset here. I hate to tell you, I think Midnight Bourbon's going to come in second again.
Yeah,
but still going to be a game to watch. Yeah, those are the big ones. And I'll tell you what, I don't know who they're playing this week, but one of the teams couple teams that I've been keeping my eye on, because they just kind of like, there are these guys hanging around in the lobby, and you know that they got something up their sleeve. You're just not sure how much they got up their sleeve. One is Washington State.
Yeah.
Hats off to those kids for the way they're playing right now. And they close out pretty good. They've got USC, UCLA, and I believe might be Washington that they played for state bragging rights. So don't be surprised to see them move up a couple more spots in the top 25. And then the other one, you know, I tend to talk about Izzo, and I'll talk about Few, and I'll talk about Randy Bennett. We talk about Patino, even though I don't know why, but we do. But we have not said one word about Bruce Pearl, and there he sits at number 11. Dangerous man, dangerous man. He's got something up his sleeve, and he's done everything just right. You know, He's got his guys. They've quietly worked their way into the 11th spot in this closing weekend of February and the beginning of March. So watch out for those two guys. I'll look and see who they're going to be playing, but we'll see how Baylor's looking when they step on the floor against Texas on Monday. But I think they're going to have another victory in the win column.
Yeah, the Big 12 is just a heavyweight fight club. It's just, it just seems like you're just seeing teams just get knocked off, and you go, wait, what? And then you look at the other team and go, oh, okay. I mean, it's incredible. I would love to, dive into, the best conferences over the last 10 years, when the season ends, and see where this Big 12 ends up. I think it's got to be pretty highly, because this conference, like I said, beats I could do an entire segment with just Big 12 teams, and it would be incredible. But the other one that jumps out to me, and I kind of alluded to it, I look at that Tuesday matchup. Illinois is a team that there's a lot of question marks that are off the court stuff, and I don't want to get into it here. You can feel free to go check out that stuff if you'd like. But at the end of the day, when March begins, we are going to be betting or, filling out your bracket or just enjoying the 40 minutes of basketball. Everything else as bad as it is, but in our minds, the only thing that matters is the 40 minutes. I want to kind of get down and see what Illinois is all about. There's a lot of noise around this program. I understand it. For me, I kind of want to cut through that. I want to see what this team does against some of these big boys. And we haven't really seen that out of the Big Ten. I alluded to it earlier. You have Purdue at the top, and then even Illinois and Michigan State, they've kind of been pushing, it's like their lightweight fight club. No disrespect to the lightweights, but it's kind of smaller punches being thrown there in the Big Ten. So I do want to see if Illinois can kind of maybe distance themselves as maybe the second best team in the Big Ten, if they can get a win over Purdue. But this SEC as well, not just a football school or not just a football conference anymore. This is a solidly the second best conference in the country. They've surpassed the ACC, which is crazy when it comes to kind of that
Right.
South recruiting. I mean, the ACC, it was like, all right, fine, SEC can have football, but we have the blue bloods. We got Tobacco Road, blah, blah, blah. Not so much anymore. So I think Saturday, it's just the hardest part of my day. I think it's just going to be trying to keep up with everything and get my previous channels together. But Big East basketball, always have a soft spot for that. Marquette, Creighton, can't wait for that one. But yeah, a Tuesday night matchup, midweek where, you got work the next day, you're stuck in the middle of the work week. I think a Purdue Illinois matchup will be a nice little treat for us out here, kind of going through the 9 to 5, all that stuff. So and that's kind of the best part, especially with baseball starting up. Those are always fun when you have essentially a game every night. The same thing here in college basketball, but that's all I got. Raider Jim, any final thoughts?
No, I wanted to make sure I got my shout out to Washington State and Bruce Pearl. So keep an eye on those guys. And of course, I have to go back. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I will tell you, I sung high praises about the Antelopes of Grand Canyon, and doggone if that night they didn't go out and lose. So, but hey,
Yeah,
they're going to be in there. They're going to be in the tournament.
I
Maybe
think
they can
so too.
match them up against Cornell and see how that goes.
That would be great. Well, and I was and that's kind of my final thought too, is listen to a podcast, and they're big enough they don't need me to plug them. But they were talking about, maybe finding a way to get to, I don't want to say make it easier on the selection committee, but maybe make it easier on all of us. That maybe 80% of your schedule is scheduled. And then we used to have it, and it was for the mid and low majors, but they called them, I believe, bracket busters. I don't know if that was their official title, but it was late in the year and it was one weekend. I believe it was either Saturday or Sunday. And it was just Murray State versus Austin P, 21-3
Right.
versus 20-5. And maybe if we could find a way to do that with some of these bubble teams, I would love to see Villanova go up against Wake Forest, kind of, I don't want to say a qualifying game, but a kind of a de facto, something that we can say, well, because a lot of times when it comes to the tournament and your selection and your resume, a lot of times it comes down to what happens in November and December, which, look, it's the regular season. I understand that. But in the grand scheme of things, November and December are light years away from March. So I think if we could find a way to get some meaningful games in, and we have very meaningful games right now, but out of conference, top tier games to where maybe we figure out, oh, okay, UConn is a lot better than Kansas. Stuff like that. I don't know.
Right.
Once again, just kind of spitballing, but be my final thought, a way to make this great game even better. And then also, look, just be safe. If you are going to storm the court or whatever, just be safe. Just keep your head on a swivel. Don't do anything stupid. We're just feel like we're holding on by a thread when it comes to the pro court storming people these days. So, but with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the In the Paint podcast presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. Talk to you all very soon. Enjoy the weekend and take care.